how to read an appraisal. They asked us to come out to just kind of give direction on this. And this is something where we want to get a little more in depth. I want to give you guys a little bit more in depth as far as how we're looking at appraisals or how underwriters look at appraisals. My background is in underwriting. I actually worked for Wachovia for a number of years. I was a secondary market underwriter for Goldman Sachs for a brief amount of time. I've seen thousands of appraisals, read thousands of appraisals.
So this is the guy who looks at the appraisals when you're disputing the appraisal.
Right, and that's really...
And his background is ruining the economy in the whole United States.
I'm the villain.
Exactly.
Right.
Background.
It's amazing what
he was an underwriter during the meltdown and then worked for Goldman.
Right.
That's right.
Yes, I'm the villain. But so what I want to show you, or what I want to discuss, is how the underwriter is going to look at the appraisal and how you as a loan officer can look at that appraisal to find if there are inconsistencies in the appraisal. Because it's really not just about the value, it's about how the appraisal or how the appraiser reaches the value conclusion, okay? And is that supported? And this is relevant because if we're in a situation where we need to put in a reconsideration request on a file, if you guys just have some quick things that you know you can look at, the things you want to hit that you want to look at to see, are these things consistent, and do I have an opportunity, if I need to do a rebuttal on this or to have a reconsideration done? Am I able to provide or find better comparables that more accurately fit with the subject property? Because the success ratio on reconsiderations is about 10%. It's not real high. So you're already starting out where you're looking at a process that doesn't necessarily have a high success ratio. So you really want to make sure that you can get all the way into this thing, and that when you take your shot to do that reconsideration, you take the best shot possible. Because essentially what you're telling the appraiser when you do a reconsideration is, hey, I'm going to write a better appraisal. And you know what? That's okay, because that is the case in some scenarios. If you've got something, or you can find something in here that might not be consistent. Now, this is a bit uncomfortable for me because I have an appraiser in this room right now, and he signs my paycheck. So just keep that in mind. Brian's actually a certified appraiser. As far as I know, we're still the only national AMC actually owned and operated by a certified appraiser.
There's a couple. There's a handful.
Really?
There's not that many of them.
I don't.
Like the whole country. There's a couple. There's like 5 or 6. There's
no.
not a lot. There's not.
Right.
Like you go to California.
Okay.
There's a couple. Yeah. There's not.
Let's go to California. Right? Yeah. Go ahead and jump in.
Mine.
Yes. So
I'm trying to close it right now.
okay. So what I did was I actually did take. I selected an appraisal that I wanted to look at that was actually done for this office.
Right.
And there are a lot of reasons for that. Primarily to do with disclosures and confidentiality. I don't have any issues if I'm bringing in your appraisal to look at with you. Obviously, it's also relevant for what you're doing, and this happens to be one of yours. Okay,
Did you
good.
bring both of them?
What's that?
Did you bring both of them?
I just brought this one up.
Because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of things we're going to look at on
We're
this.
gonna work on the appeal.
Well, this one's going to be tough to appeal, but I'll show you why. Okay.
I didn't try.
Well, we'll go through it, but basically, what you're looking at, the appraisal is broken down, and you've got the different subsections you can see outlined, and this is on a 1073 on the side here. 1073, 1004 are going to look roughly the same. Obviously, a 1073 is going to have information that's specific to the condo unit and to the project as well, but those are all things you really want to look at, particularly on a 1073, but generally will be relevant as well for the 1004.
All right, so I'm sorry to do this, but
No.
you're throwing out numbers. Where do we know what that is?
Okay.
Like, you gotta remember, this is a
Type of form. What is the 1073?
Yeah, 1073.
So the 1073 is the form number identifier for a condominium appraisal. A 1004 would be for a single family.
So 1003 is the loan app.
Right.
1004 is the
1003 is the loan app. 1004 is the appraisal on a single family.
Yeah.
1073 is the appraisal on a condo. If you have a multi-unit and it's an investment property, you're looking at a 1025. And that will include 2 forms, a 216 and a 1007, the operating income statement and the rental schedule. little bit more in depth in those, and actually we can do a training on interpreting 216s, 1007s. I didn't bring a file that had that information, it's a little bit more in depth. So we'll do the basics first. Now, the first thing the underwriter is going to look at on the file is all the relevant information about the subject, just to make sure that the property address is correct, all the information is actually correct. Everything is spelled out correctly, etc. Okay, and that's very important because if this is not, if anything in here isn't right, when this goes to secondary market, that underwriter is going to demand a correction. That's problematic because that could be 30, 60, 90 days down the line. Trust me, getting an appraiser to revise a file that's 90 days old, not the easiest thing to do, particularly on a closed file. Still can be done. So this is why the underwriter is going to pay particular attention just to make sure the data here is entered correctly. The next thing is they're going to look at this when you've got a contract section. This is a purchase. So arm's length sale, we're good there. We've got the contract price, the data contract, and yes, the property seller is the owner of record. And there are concessions on this as well, which is important to note. Okay, that there's a 3% concession and it's noted. Now, it's very important on a purchase to make sure when you order the appraisal that you've got an executed sales contract, because if we send a file to an appraiser or an order to an appraiser for a report and they don't have, as a purchase transaction, they don't have a signed contract, they can't do the report because they don't actually have, there's no deal there, right? So they've got to sign it. So that's important. I've actually seen files delayed a little bit because they've got to work out getting the contract signed. So, and again, you don't want to delay a file on that. So, want to make sure that your contract is set, it's all signed, it's filled out, it's complete before you order the appraisal. And what the, again, what the underwriter will do is make sure that the information in the contract section matches with what's on the contract. Okay, real kind of standard stuff.
On this part, like, I see the 3%, seller concession.
Mhm.
We have a program that we've been asking realtors to get 5% seller concession.
Okay.
Which we've been successful doing, but we've also noted, I've noted that there's some additional comments that are being put in there that we need to kind of be
Okay.
looking for. The appraisers are kind of commenting, the market's generally at 3, but this is at 5, which is still acceptable, but they're kind of like pointing it out.
Okay.
I've seen that, not through you guys, but through Value Trust in particular,
Okay.
that has done that.
One thing we can do.
It's more appraiser specific, right?
Like some of them, because depending on where, so sometimes 5% depending on the area is common, right?
Mhm.
So like 3 to 5%, they're looking at the concessions and just kind of saying that they're a little above average. 5%, what they're looking at is to see if the price is inflated.
Mhm.
So like it was listed at 300, and then it's under contract for 310, but they can see, the modified contract was at 3%, and then they change it to 5%.
Mhm.
They're just trying to figure out if they bump the price to accommodate for the concessions,
Okay.
which happens all the time. But like, in today's market, because it's increasing, it's a little easier to justify.
Mhm.
In a decreasing market, you have some prices come
Okay.
along.
So is there a problem with that? I mean, is there?
Yeah, so what they're looking for is they don't want, so the way that's supposed to work is it's a seller's concession. It's not a price increase,
Right.
right? So if the seller agrees to pay 5%, so the house is worth $100,000. The seller agrees to pay 5%, so that means that they're netting 95,000. They're not changing the price to 105 and then
Mhm.
keeping their 100, right? Which, let's say, for all intents and purposes, 80% of the time that's what they do, but there's enough variations in the market to say, okay, well, the price points are at 97 to 110, so it doesn't really make a difference anyway. Well, as the market starts increasing, or if you start having situations where it's obvious that they're at the high end of the market and they're just increasing the purchase price to cover the seller concessions, the appraiser's supposed to knock it down. Because then, essentially the values just keep going up with every purchase.
Right.
Right, forever.
And
Yeah.
it's actually relevant to what we're going to talk about
Yeah.
here with the neighborhood section. And this is where you're going to see those characteristics. And this is actually important, and we'll show this on the next couple of slides as well, to where this kind of starts to add up and pieces sort of start fitting together, okay? So in the neighborhood section, what we're looking at here, what the underwriter's going to look at is the neighborhood characteristics. So, what is this? Is this an urban, a suburban, or rural property? If this is marked rural, that's going to change a lot of the complexion of the rest of the report in terms of what are acceptable for comparables, okay? In this case, we're not looking at a rural property, we're looking at a suburban property, okay, that's built up over 75% with stable growth. Perfect, okay, this is a good area, right? We're not gonna have any potential weird surprises that pop up, on this. And then we're gonna look at the housing trends, and then again, in this case, it's condominium specific, it's 1073. If we were looking at the 1004 single-family appraisal report, this would say single unit or single-family unit housing trends. Again, it's gonna let us know property values, are they increasing, are they stable, or are they declining? What's the demand supply, is there a shortage, are they in balance, and what the marketing time is. And the marketing time is very important on this, because it's a purchase file, okay? Now, he's giving marketing time under 3 months, which means if I go look at the comps on this, and the comps are aged over 3 months, why? Why are you giving me old comps? If you're telling me the market is under 3 months, that's average, unless there's some exceptional property characteristic here that would take this outside of using sort of standard comps or the standard comps for what's going on in this market, I expect these comps to be under 3 months. I don't want to see these over 3 months in this report, okay? Again, if you've got a marketing time 3 to 6 months or over 6 months and it's a rural property, well, now it makes sense you've got a year-old comp that's farther out, because you have to have that based on the market characteristics. But this is what's telling you what you should expect the comps to look like later in the report. So in this case, we're looking at under 3 months and imbalance is stable. And then the other side here is the range, okay? So what you're looking at in terms of range. So your low, okay, to your high. So between 50 to 350, predominantly they're around 150, okay, is predominant value for this area for these condos, and then just predominant age, okay, so between 5 years, 45, about 20 years old. So this is a really, I hate to say sort of standard suburban market, but it's really kind of a standard suburban market. And this is really what you would expect to see on an appraisal in a market that's stable, okay, and that has property values increasing. Now they're not runaway, but they're increasing.
Can you explain, like, if it's a suburban, urban, or rural, the difference in comparables, expectations, distance and stuff, just so they have an idea?
Yeah, and I'll get a little more into that in the next one. In fact, we can go to the next.
Can I, real quick before we?
Sure.
So that marketing time box there, is that a big deal as far as the underwriters, or where does it play more of a role in the value or the underwriter? I mean, like, maybe they were just at the right place at the right time. Maybe, these guys are approved and ready, and this one just popped up, it's great, they jumped on it.
We're
So
talking about the listing time on market.
Yeah, so that's based on that's based on not the specific property, that's based on the overall market area.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
like out of 1,000 properties. So in like you think, so Fannie and Freddie are looking at it from a national perspective, right? So 3 to 6 months is, let's say, normal marketing time for a property. You put it on the market, sit on the market for 3 months, somebody buys it. Under 3 months is, let's say, a faster,
Yeah.
right? So they're just trying to get a gauge for, and that is actually covered on the 1004 MC too.
So how does that fit? So is that gonna have a big deal on the
Yes, potentially.
Okay.
And here's why. Because it's going to speak to the suitability of comps used in the report, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to see aged comps with a housing trend that's identified with a under 3 month marketing time. Again, you don't want to see an aged comp. Again, it depends on how this is filled out. In this case, it's under 3 months, it's stable, it's in balance. There's nothing funky going on here, right? But, and I'll show you when we go to the next slide. In fact, Kelly, if you want to hit the next one, okay? Go one more real quick. I just want to get to the grid. One more. Thanks. Okay, so on the grid, where this is going to really count. One more. Sorry. So on the sales grid, what you're looking at is you're looking at your date and sale, okay, for under 3 months. Now, and this is a good example because you've got an aged comp for comp 1. Now, there's a reason for that, and there's a little more in here to explain why you've got an aged comp in comp 1. So if you just look at, again, it's about putting all these pieces together. So if you only look at that one snapshot from the housing trends and the marketing time and all that, you're going to go, well, this comp's over 3 months, I'm going to dismiss it. not quite. We'll get into, I'll explain why. But that's where that becomes relevant, okay, is the marketing time, is the age of the comps. So if you've got an aged comp that doesn't look suitable, and we'll get into a little bit more about what makes these suitable comps, that's where, when you are looking at potentially doing a VR, that's the comp you're gonna identify, I wanna go after and try to replace them with core, okay? Can we just go back a couple real quick, and I wanna, okay. One more, go forward. Now, again, specific to the condo, we're looking at the project site, the project information. As a loan officer, and I know I don't have to probably tell you all this, but this is where you would see this in the appraisal. Some of the things you want to check in, and what the underwriter's going to look at on this really quickly is what's the primary occupancy for this phase? Because if you've got, now in this case it's principal residence, which is ideal. If it's second home or tenant, lender's going to look at that a little differently, okay? And they're going to really scrutinize the occupancy on the origination that you're doing. Why are you buying a principal residence in a condo that's primarily filled with tenants or second homes? They're going to want to know that, right? So they may look a little more depth into the occupancy, okay? And this is the big one. Is the developer in control of the homeowners association? Yes or no? Again, you all know as LOs, there are a lot of lenders. If that's yes, you got a problem, right? You may lose the deal, or you may have to get further explanation on why that's the case. As well as any single entity owning more than 10% of the project. Very, very relevant, very, very important. Again, these are all, the answers on this report are all very positive and in the right direction. But this is where you can look at this to see, am I gonna have issues on this file, potentially issues on this file, based on the condo project, not necessarily on the individual unit, but on the project overall. And most of these, you're not gonna have too many issues. Because realistically, by the time you get to ordering an appraisal, you're probably already gonna have the HOA cert filled out, and you'll know this information anyway. But again, you wanna make sure it matches with what's on the HOA cert. Because if it doesn't, someone's wrong. And it's not likely to be the HOA, right? It's probably gonna be the appraiser. So, just very relevant to make sure you take a look at that. And then this one here, commercial space in the project. That is becoming much more prevalent now with mixed use, okay? Typically the guideline, 25%, you're okay, you can consider it mixed use. If you go over 25% in commercial, for commercial space, again, you're looking at certified general, you're looking at a different type of report. You go to the next one, okay? And again, just continuation of the project information, amenities, et cetera.
We got a tennis court.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So, and there's additional information in certain cases that lenders will ask for with respect to the common elements and the amenities and whatnot. And that can be filled out on the PUD information, if it's a PUD. But in this case, it's gonna all be in the project information. So, again, there's nothing in here that's gonna jump out that's gonna cause an issue with this particular file. But this is where you would see it if it were a project problem or project concern. So, next one. Okay, now this is the unit itself. This one's also very important because this is going to give you the information about the actual unit. And again, it's just going to match up with your expectations. It's a 2.2, it's 1,009 square feet. It includes the following appliances. Important because if one of these is checked off and it's not actually included, you're looking at a 1004D because you're going to have that finished up. Parking, amenities, all right here, okay? All right here. Upgrades. They didn't give me credit for my upgrades.
Oh, yeah.
We just did the kitchen. They didn't give me credit for the upgrades. Right here. You're gonna look right here, okay? Where are the upgrades? Has this been upgraded? And again, you wanna look at this because if you're telling me this is updated less than 1 year ago, and I look at the photos of the subject, and the cabinets are all broken, and the counters are all Formica and stained and old, that kitchen wasn't updated. Either I've got the wrong photos, or I've gotta make a correction here to indicate, okay? And that may change comps, that may change adjustments, right? So very important to check that. No fiscal deficiencies, that's good. Do not want to see that. Okay, again, at that point, you're looking at repairs in the 1004D. Avoid that if at all possible. And it's conforming to the neighborhood. Yes, good, we're good to go. Okay. Next one, and then just prior sale. So, next one, okay, so now this is where we get into the really good stuff. And this is the grid, the sales grid. we've got our subject, and then we've got our comps. And there's another grid that's gonna contain another additional comp and the listings as well. So we'll get to that in a second, but the things you wanna look at here, first and foremost, remember, the appraiser indicated that this was a stable market in supply, suburban. Well, here you go. If you look right up here, you've got 53 comps in the subject neighborhood in the last 12 months, and you've got your price range between 100 and 300,000. Now, if you look now, you've got currently 5 listings. That's it. Only 5. Again, from 100 to 300. That's an indication of a stable market. That makes sense. If you looked at this and you saw you had, let's say 5 comps, and the price was 120 to 320, well, now you've got an accelerating market, right? Because here's what you've sold for, but now here's where the market is presently, okay? The underwriter's going to want to look at that. They're not going to give it as much weight if it's accelerating. They're going to give it a lot more weight if it's decelerating. In other words, I've got the comps sold 100 to 300, but now the listings are 85 to 280. Something's not right. Is that still a stable market? The underwriter's going to want to correct that on the file. So this is something you want to look at. So again, this makes sense for a stable market, and it matches up with what we're looking at previously in the report. And we'll get to the MC. I'll show you the MC, and we'll talk about how that also matches. And again, you want all 3 of these to be the same. You want them all to match up. It's all going to line up, okay? When we get into the actual grid and the actual sales grid, this is where it gets good. This is the property information. So we already know about our subject. We've got our contract price, square footage. Sale price per square footage. Throw it out the window. It's not relevant. It's really not. People want to, realtors and agents will put all their weight on price per square foot. No. It varies. There's no standard for a price per square foot, and that's not really how the investor is going to look at this, because that's a very small part of the overall, okay?
Now, that's on the residential side. On the commercial side, isn't square footage price more relevant?
Absolutely, but to be fair, if we were talking about analyzing a commercial report, we would be here for a couple days. I mean,
I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, you're correct, you are
On that
correct.
side, I thought square footage was.
Yeah, commercial is, because essentially they're gonna bill it out, right? So it's
Right.
just, A grade, what type of quality of the construction, so, A class building, B class building, C class building, D class building, and then the empty space, right? And then the only differentiations is like, okay, is it like an approved lab? Is it like a building that can, has special HVAC, so you can do like in Montgomery County, there's a lot of medical.
Yeah.
So they're buildings that have a lot of medical, it's a whole different animal, right? Because you could do like, rat testing or something like that, or chemical testing and stuff like that. And there's drainage and stuff like that built into the building to handle those types of things. In residential, the price per square foot really doesn't mean that much, right? It's on there, but it just really doesn't mean, it really doesn't mean that much. No, it just,
And you have to
Okay.
do all
More
the
of a reference point.
yeah, it doesn't really mean that. It doesn't really.
So, to kind of continue on, one of the things we do want to look at on this, and I'm going to nitpick this report a little tiny bit and say I would have liked to see the concessions here in the grid.
Okay.
That's it. That's the only thing on the grid that I'm gonna have an issue. I know there's concessions, they're noted earlier in the report. It's 5, 5, yeah, I wanna see that here, okay? But because it's relevant and because you've got concessions on your comps, at least on one of your comps. Okay. But that would show that that's a standard for the market, that's not anything unusual, right? When Brian was talking about, making over concessions to kind of mess with price, this is where you would see that. If you've got all comps and there's no sales concessions at all in an accelerating market, yet your subject all of a sudden has a bunch of sales concessions on an overinflated value, you see where you've got something fun.
Yeah.
But again, that's one thing I would ask for on this, is I would have that.
So if the sales concessions were lowered on that, because it said 5,500 on the other page, so if the sales concessions were lowered on that, then that could that help to increase the value of that property?
Not necessarily.
So sales concessions don't directly affect the value of the property?
Well, they can. in this, on this report, they don't. They can, and again, it's an indication of are people playing with pricing in the market? In other words, am I gonna be willing to give you more of a sales concession just because I'm able to pump up the contract price? Or as a way to offset, because, again, to Brian's point, if the sale price is 100,000 and I'm making a 5% concession, really the sale price is 95,000.
Yeah,
At
so
least net back to the
a good
seller.
example is
So-
the 1 and 2 comparables, right? So 180 and 180, 0 concessions on FHA on the first file, Fred to point that out,
Yeah,
right? And then on the second one, on conventional,
On conventional,
3,500, right? If you look at comparable number 3, so it's 174,000, it's outside the subject's project.
Mhm.
So if there was a situation to where, let's say, that property was listed, comparable number 2, at 180, and then it was put under contract for 185, let's just say, and there was $5,000 in concessions. If I was the appraiser, I would have knocked off $5,000
right.
from that, because you could just tell the market is saying the house is worth 180 or 175 to 180. It's on the high end of the range now. And it was listed lower, and then he changed it up. He could have made an adjustment on that one, right? Because it was a little higher. Because there was some concessions on it. He didn't do it because it's not relevant.
Yeah,
But that's what he's looking for. He's looking for if the sale price was changed to a higher amount to offset the concessions back to the buyer.
Well, that happens all the time in the marketplace.
sure.
Yeah, it's
But-
just
but-
what's
but-
normal, right? What's normal,
Right.
So it's like, did he inflate the price above and beyond?
Right, yeah,
Does that happen, like with the Nehemiah program they were doing back in the day, right? They were pumping up the values $15,000, $20,000 to get the down payment assistance that was supposed to come from the seller,
Right.
right? So as the appraiser, you're looking and you're thinking, okay, this house was listed for 150, why is it now 170? Right, because they had $20,000 for the Nehemiah program as a gift. That's not a gift, they changed the sale price, right?
So here are the three fields on this grid that you want to look at and really laser focus on if you're going to be submitting a reconsideration. Right? This is the whole reason we're having this, is so you guys can have this information. The 3 things you want to look at, okay? First and foremost, proximity to subject. How far is the comp? Because, and in this case, again, you've got 2 comps in the same subject, which is great. That's what you want to see, and you've got one outside the bracket. That's what you want to see on a condo. You want comps in the relevant project, okay? And then you want one outside. You need one comp outside the bracket, the market, okay? So distance to subject. This is one that really messes a lot of people up. A lot of LOs. Man, I got a much better sale. I got a much better sale. I got a much better sale. How close is it to the subject? It's only a mile away. Man, every comp in your report's a half mile or less. The appraiser's gonna say they didn't use that comp because it's farther out. Could they have used it? Yes. But, okay, if CU runs on that, or there's a review on that, and they see that there's a closer comp, okay, that could have been used, they're probably gonna wanna see that closer comp in the report. So appraisers are going to try to get the closest reasonable comp. So again, proximity to subject, because you can always find a higher price comp if you go farther out. Always. But again, remember, we're in a suburban neighborhood with a stable market with plenty of sales. So we don't necessarily need to use the farther away comp. So always look at the proximity when you're looking at a comp to replace. Okay, if you've got one that's closer, you're good. If it's farther out, there's gonna be the reason that the appraiser states that they didn't use it. Now, there's a couple of other ones where you could theoretically make a case, no, this is still a better comp even if it's farther out. Because you got 3 fields you want to look at. So you can't base it all on one. One is proximity, okay? The next is date of sale and time. Is it a recent comp or is it aged? Okay? And this one really trips up folks because I've seen a lot of ERs come in where, man, that comp is way better than anything in the report. The problem is it closed after the effective date of the appraisal, so we can't use it. Because it wasn't a valid data point when the appraisal was written, okay? But you wanna also look at that date and sale, again.
Generally speaking, what time frame are you all looking for comps? Like, if they provide, if the realtors provide us with new comps, are you looking within 3 months, the last 3 months, or the last 6 months? Which one?
As, the more recent, the better, right? Always the more recent, the better, and it depends on the situation with the file. In this case, because it's a suburban property with plenty of comps, you know, you want under 3 months. I mean, that's what's in the grid, or that's what's in the MC, that's what's, you know, that's what's in the report. You wanna see under 3 months on the sales on these.
So hypothetically, you have, on the next page, you have the listings that are
Mhm.
active. So
Yep.
we have a listing that is active on this report, and now by the time we get this report, that is closed.
Potentially, yes, that's.
But we can't use that closed comp now as
If-
just for value?
Well, if the date of sale that closing was recorded, if that's after the effective date of the appraisal, the appraiser's not gonna utilize it. It's not a valid data point. But, you know, believe it or not, I've seen situations where that listing closes before the report, before the effective date on the report, even though it's a listing, because, and it's a rare example where the appraiser for some reason gets delayed and then has to go back out to the property for something. And so the original, what would have been the original effective date now gets changed because they've got to revisit. It's a really unusual scenario. So for the most part, yeah, if it's a listing, again, if it's a closed sale date after the effective date on the appraisal, it's just not.
Kelly, is there any listings
It's
on
not
this?
valid.
Can you
Yeah,
forward?
There are, we'll get to them one side, I just want to,
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah.
So date of sale and time, and then the next one is gross living area. Now, in a condo, that's not as big of a deal as on a single family. You see a lot more variance in a single family home than in a condo, but these are the 3 areas that you want to look at. Okay, because that's where most appraisers, 90% of appraisers are going to dismiss your comps based on one of these 3 things, okay? And keep in mind, when a realtor is looking at comps that they're gonna give you to refute on an appraisal, they're not aware of any of these, right? They're not the expert like you are, they're not aware of these things, okay? They don't have the same guidelines to determine the opinion of value that the appraiser has to follow. So for them, they can go and get a comp 2 miles away. They can go and get an aged comp, and for them, in their mind,
Makes sense.
right, it makes sense, that helps, that's what's informing their opinion. But because the appraiser has to follow certain guidelines, okay, and put the appraisal together in a certain way, it's a disconnect.
I've
okay?
had them try to sell me listings. Well, this house is listed down the street. Oh,
Mhm.
well, it hasn't sold yet. I mean,
So when it comes to listings, right, so what the appraiser's looking for, so with a situation like this is pretty cookie cutter. I mean, you got homes, let's say 1217 comparable number 1.
And that, I'm gonna talk more about that in a second.
Yeah, comparable number 2, 180, most recent 518, so just a couple months ago, 418, 174. So for all intents and purposes, it's stable,
Mhm.
right? If there was a situation where, let's say for instance, 1217 sold for 195, or let's say sold for 160, right, or 150, and then you have the other 2 comparables that are more recent, at higher numbers or lower numbers, the listings become very relevant at that point. The
Okay.
listings and contracts, because for any increases, like for instance, if they're trying to justify a value increase, it has to be piggybacked on the listings and contracts.
Okay.
And then for any decreases, they're looking for the same thing.
Alright.
Because the contracts right now, you know, if there's a house on the market that's for exactly like the subject, that's for 160, and this thing's under contract for 180, and it's been on the market for 3 months, well, the house is not worth 180, because they would just buy that for 160.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would just back out of the contract and pay $20,000 flat.
Okay, so just to jump in real quick and to
Sorry for
address.
interrupting you.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate
Yeah.
you adding to the discussion. So, to point out, you know, I'm sitting here saying, well, these are the things you want to look at, date and sale. Here's an aged comp, right? It's an aged comp. You're telling me sometimes under 3 months. This is 1217, man. That comp's old. It's 6 months old by the time this report's written. Why is it even in here? Here's why it's in here. Now, to be fair, yeah, I'm nitpicking. I would swap comp 1 and 2 if I were the appraiser. I'd make comp 2 comp 1. Comp 1 comp 2. Now, he likely didn't do that because of the concession. just speculation on what the appraiser's doing. But the reason that he's including that sale, which may appear aged, is because it is in the subject phase. So it's likely that these are the two most recent sales in the subject phase, and it's basically, aside from one minor adjustment for square footage, it's the exact same property. It's on a different floor, but otherwise it's effectively the same property. And you can see that with the adjustments down here, okay? And you literally no adjustments on this comp, none on the comp two. I would have used comp two as comp one, just me personally. So that's why that aged comp is in there. Now, that being said, if you go back and you find a sale in the same phase for a 2-bedroom unit, right? And it's more recent than your 1217, then there you go. You have an opportunity to submit that as a VR and say, well, here, we can replace comp one with this comp. Why? Because this comp one is aged. And this is the same comp or a similar comp. Same subject phase, basically the same property. More recent sale, better indication of the market. Be careful with that. No other AMC will tell you this. I'll tell you this now. Compliance people, close your ears.
We don't have those.
No.
Because if you look at that more recent comp and the sales price is, let's say, 170, you don't want that in this report.
Okay, yeah.
That's gonna hurt your value, okay? Pay attention to that. I will tell you, I actually had a situation. I had a loan officer submit a reconsideration with one comp on an FHA file. The comp he submitted was $35,000 below the contract price.
Why would you even do
Then
that?
why did he submit that?
Thank you.
Drop
How does a foreclosure affect?
Excellent question, and I'm gonna show that in the next, in the MC. It's relevant, very relevant to the market, and it's noted, but it's gonna be in the next page. So,
Before you leave that
Sure.
page, I have a question.
Okay.
You said I would have used comp two as comp one.
yeah, I just want to know that.
Okay, now, the position of the comp, does that have any weight on the value of the property?
No, not unless the appraiser actually puts the commentary in to say, I'm putting more weight on this comp for this reason. Again, this is just it's just a personal thing for me that I
It
would
paints a better picture.
flip.
Yeah, it paints a better picture.
I see
Yeah,
what you're saying.
put it this way, if I'm the underwriter and I see this is comp one,
Yeah.
I feel, then I immediately think to myself, oh, well, the reason you use this one is just because it's the same subject phase even though it's aged.
Is this an FHA loan
No,
that we're
Yeah.
doing?
is it?
Yes,
So-
Is it?
So that's why. So he's probably using FHA first to show that this has already been an FHA approved project and to keep it going.
There you go.
Okay.
I mean, because if I saw conventional as an underwriter, I gotta look now and see whether or not FHA is relevant.
Yes,
And again, it makes sense because of the concession. Convention. All right, so.
But I see what you're saying. The square footage is closer, there's
Yeah.
no net adjustment.
Oh, and by the way,
It's sooner.
while we're talking about the adjustments at the bottom here, yeah, I mean, look, you're looking below 4% on gross adjustments. You got good comps. across the
And
board.
what is it that we're looking for in that? Because I've seen some swing quite a bit, especially out in the east end, things like that. You get out there and
Yeah, if you're seeing adjustments, if they're over 25-30%, it's not really a comp. I mean, unless you have very limited other comps to use.
Right.
But if you've got 53 comps in the subject neighborhood with that bracket value, and you're coming in here and you're giving me 30% adjustments on the, I've got to look at that and wonder, why do I have so many adjustments on these comps? It's an indication of, one, either you've got bad comps in the file, or the subject property has some unique characteristics to it that take it out of being sort of the standard or fitting with the property characteristics for the neighborhood, in which case you've got to ask, is this an over improvement or is this an under improvement, right? Do I have a castle in a swamp or what? Because the adjustments should not be that high. Right? Now again, in this case, they're nothing, they're minimal. So we've got good comps in this file. Okay, so jump to the next one. Reports made as is, again, just something to check at and look at, okay? Anything in here, and just to speak to the point he's got in here, comps 2 to 4 are the most recent sales, and they were relied on the most. That's how he reads. So he's got his commentary in here. to how he's gridded out there, the comps, okay? As is, which is good, because if there were any repairs, any health and safety issues, in this case, anything that was needed to be brought up to meet the handbook standard, it will be marked here to be subject to, and then you'd be looking at a final inspection. So just something to and you would hope too that the homeowner would kind of mention, right? Hey, I've got missing drawings.